the last episode.
Welcome to episode 4 of The Modern Years, the final show in a 4-part series. I'm your host, Tommy K, bringing you all the weirdness of presidents from number 35 to number 45. And to get things started on our first weird president, JFK, I bring you my co-host, the amazing Tommy Jr.
John F. Kennedy was the youngest president to ever be elected, as opposed to Teddy Roosevelt, who was the youngest president to ever assume the presidency, but he wasn't actually elected in his first term. John F. Kennedy is famous for the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis being, of course, the closest humanity ever came to the end of the world.
We almost lost it all. John F. Kennedy also started the food stamps program for people who were poor.
Americans.
His last words. You know what his last words were?
His last words were, "No, you certainly can't," which was kind of morbidly, hilariously in response to Nellie Connolly's words to him, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you."
Yeah. And he said, you certainly can't.
Of course.
In his inaugural speech, he said the famous words, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." He was the first president who was a Boy Scout. He started the Peace Corps. Kennedy installed a secret tape machine in the White House.
Which is why we know really anything about this Cuban Missile Crisis in the first place.
That'll bring us to number 36, Lyndon B. Johnson, 1963 to 1969. With a vision for a great society for the American people, he became number 36. He actually got off the Wabash Cannonball plane that he was scheduled to ride on to go to the bathroom, and the plane left without him, and it ended up crashing and everyone on board perished. So, we almost didn't have the Lyndon Johnson
administration.
His wife's nickname was Lady Bird. He declined to run for a second term. Johnson created the Medicare and Medicaid programs. He championed civil rights, but it was overshadowed by the Vietnam War.
Interestingly, the likely reason that he championed civil rights, despite being a Southern Democrat, which would have opposed the civil rights movement at the time, is likely because he was trying to preserve the legacy of John F. Kennedy, meaning that in this timeline in which JFK was assassinated, it probably went through Congress and the Senate faster than it would have otherwise.
And that brings us to number 37, Richard M. Nixon, president from 1969 to 1974. He became the only president ever to resign the office as a result of the Watergate scandal. He had a 1-lane bowling alley put in the basement of the White House. Well, that's kind of weird. Nixon used the comedy show Laugh-In to get elected. Back in those days, people didn't really think of using television as a promotional tool.
At least not in that way. It would be things like speeches or political debates, not so much a comedy television show.
He made a national TV speech that saved his career in 1952. Well, how about that? Here's a word from our sponsor.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Richard Nixon made a masterful political speech in 1952 that saved his career. He referenced his dog, Checkers, which was given to him as a gift, which he was using to show government corruption. He was saying people shouldn't be taking gifts from anyone if they're in politics, but he was saying he'll break the rules a little bit and take the dog he received, Checkers. This was also meant as a stab at FDR's famous speech, the Fala speech.
A dog named Checkers.
However, this ended up backfiring on him because the speech became known as the Checkers speech, which infinitely annoyed him.
His middle name is Milhouse. Nixon
Nice.
created the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and that'll bring us to number 38, Gerald R. Ford. He was president from 1974 to 1977. Good evening, I'm Gerald Ford, and you're not. When he took the oath of office, I declared, I assume the presidency under extraordinary circumstances. This is an hour of history that troubles our minds and hurts our hearts. He wasn't actually elected to the office of vice president or president. His daughter Susan hosted her senior prom on the White House lawn, or was it at the White House? I'm not sure. 2 different assassins tried to take Ford's life within over a span of 17 days. Both of them were women. Lynette Squeaky Fromm from the Charles Manson gang, and 2 weeks later, radical activist Sarah Jane Moore fired a gun at the president in San Francisco. A bystander knocked a gun out of her hand. Another weird thing about Ford is his birth name wasn't Gerald R. Ford. He was born Leslie Lynch King Jr. His parents divorced soon after his birth, and his mom married a paint salesman named Gerald Rudolph Ford, who became his stepfather. King had neglected to pay his court-ordered child support, and Ford said that he never truly forgave his father. Ford was actually very athletic. He received offers from 2 professional football teams, the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers, but he turned them down. He stood by his decision to pardon Nixon, even though it might have cost him the election.
The reason we made that SNL reference in the beginning is because he's also famous for being the first president to ever be mocked publicly by SNL because of the fact that he was never elected.
President Johnson once said that Representative Ford had played too much football without a helmet. And he was a good golfer, but he was a klutzy golfer, and he would swing and
knock someone out.
Yeah, lose the club. That brings us to number 39, Jimmy Carter, president from 1977 to 1981. He's a Georgia peanut farmer. He appeared in Playboy magazine during his campaign and said, I've looked on a lot of women with lust. I've committed adultery in my heart many times. This is something that God has recognized I will do. I have done it, and God forgives me for it. He took a lot of flack, but he never apologized. So in 2002, Carter was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Iranian hostage crisis proved to be a significant factor in his 1980 loss to Ronald Reagan, not to mention long lines at the gas pump during a gas shortage. OPEC flexed its muscles and disrupted oil supplies. I remember sitting in the backseat of a car during lines, waiting for gas and hoping that the gas station didn't run out of gas.
You get up there and they're like, sorry.
He
disliked the pageantry of the presidency. He banned workers from playing Hail to the Chief during appearances. Modesty. May have seen a UFO.
He has something there about idol worship in today's politicians. He was the first president that installed solar panels on the White House. He got attacked by a rabbit and lost. Some of his quotes are, "We should live our lives as though Christ was coming this afternoon."
He also said that penalties against possession of a drug should not be more damaging to an individual than the use of the drug itself, and where they are, they should be changed.
That brings us to President number 40, Ronald Reagan.
Who had a noticeably different perspective on drug laws in the United States.
He was president from 1981 to 1989. His term saw a restoration of prosperity at home with a goal of achieving peace through strength abroad. Reagan regularly consulted with an astrologer named Joan Quigley before making decisions and scheduling big events. He was nicknamed the Gipper, but his dad called him Dutch. As a baby, he looked like a fat little Dutchman, a nickname strengthened by the Dutch boy haircuts he received as a child. As an actor, he was in over 50 movies. He played real-life college football player George Gipper Gipp in a movie, survived an assassination attempt on March 30th, 1981, was nearly choked out by a chimp named Peggy in 1951, making the movie Bedtime for Bonzo. The chimp grabbed his tie and refused to let go. The crew saved him and cut the tie. The knot was no bigger than a fingernail. He had an FBI code named T10. He wrote letters to everyone. He was a big Michael Jackson supporter and wrote a fan letter to Michael Jackson. In 1966, he gave up pipe smoking and took on eating jelly beans. He received free jelly beans for 8 years of the presidency and issued jelly bean jars with the official presidential seal at the events. Reagan won 49 states of his election. His middle name is Wilson, and Mikhail Gorbachev attended Reagan's funeral. Was a Democrat until 1962. Reagan was a FDR Democrat till high taxes and trying to reduce permanent big government. Loyalty to the party.
He lost his enthusiasm because of a commitment to larger government, higher taxes, things, and the fact that in his opinion, the Republicans took a more serious stance against communism.
Yeah, he wanted to reduce permanent big government.
The Democrats and the Republicans at pretty much any time in U.S. history were anti-communist, but he saw the Republican Party as being much, much more anti-communist than the Democrats.
Ronald Reagan was 2 weeks short of his 70th birthday on his inauguration as president. The previous oldest president was William Henry Harrison. He was 68. Upon taking office, died of a cold. Roosevelt, Jefferson, and Coolidge were Reagan's favorite predecessors. Reagan was the governor of California, and I have wondered at times what he said, I have wondered at times what the Ten Commandments would have looked like if Moses had run them through the U.S. Congress. Another quote he had was spoken to his wife after his assassination attempt. He said, "Honey, I forgot to duck."
I believe if the Ten Commandments had been run through the U.S. Congress, they would probably have been about 50 pages long each.
Oh, there would have been a lot of pork spending in there.
A lot of swimming pools.
Number 41, George H.W. Bush, president from 1989 to 1993. Herbert Walker promises traditional American values and a determination to direct them towards making the United States a kinder and gentler nation. Anything other wouldn't be prudent. He made vomiting in public a thing. President Bush threw up all over the Japanese prime minister in 1992. That's kind of weird.
That's pretty good. Apparently, I wish I had looked up the phrase. Apparently, there's still a phrase based on that event, like in Japan. Like it's become like an idiom.
Oh goodness!
Like pulling a George Bush or something.
He led an international coalition of countries and forced Saddam Hussein's Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait. He was a CIA director, and he was the second president after John Adams to be father of a president. On July 13th, 1985, he was acting president for almost 8 hours when President Reagan underwent surgery. He spoke on numerous occasions about implementing a new world order and was a member of a secret society named Skull and Bones. That brings us to number 42.
William J. Clinton.
Bubba Clinton, 93 to 2001. You know what? That's not his real name. Not Bubba, but Clinton. Bubba's not his real name either.
His real name is Blythe.
Yep, he changed it.
Sounds like an anime character or something.
He changed it when he was a teenager after his stepfather's last name, Clinton. He was the first elected president of the United States to be impeached. He was impeached for lying about his affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. Creator of the now defunct NAFTA, which is now something else. It's been reworked. On the last day of presidency, he gave 140 pardons. Slick Willie also gave us a variety of scandals and was a frequent flyer on the Lolita Express. He and his wife Hillary, after the presidency, moved their political operation from Arkansas to New York. On a lighter note, when Bill eats an apple, he eats the entire apple, including the core and the seeds.
I think that should be in of itself an impeachable offense.
43, George W. Bush, From 2001 to 2009, the Decider-in-Chief started a global war on terror as a member of a secret society called Skull and Bones. W's Bones name was Magog. In case you are unaware of this secret club, here's a brief description. New members reportedly divulge intimate personal details, including their full sexual histories, before they are inducted. They also agree to give part of their estates to the club, but in return they receive the promise of lifelong financial stability. So don't tell anyone you heard it here, so they won't be tempted to sell the club's secrets. Some say W believed the global Middle East invasion was prophesied in the Old Testament based on the Gog and Magog prophecy in the book of Ezekiel. Big Love William Taft also received the honorary title of Magog, but his was for having the most sexual experiences while in the secret club, according to journalist Alexandra Robbins. W has a plethora of Bushism like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. He was an actual cheerleader and he was convicted of a DUI. And now we go to number 44, Barack Obama, president from 2009 to 2017. Hawaiian-born, Chicago community organizer turned junior senator, Barack Hussein Obama became the 44th president of the U.S. And contrary to media hype, Barack wasn't completely scandal-free, as you can look up Fast and Furious gun-walking scandal, which did result in American deaths. In his early days, he had a pet ape called Tata while living in Indonesia. His family originated from Kenya, making him the first African-American president. He is not the most pro-capitalism. He coined the phrase share the wealth and referred to Joe the plumber as saying, "You didn't build that," about Joe's plumbing business. "Americans' chickens have come home to roost" was a phrase made famous by Barack Obama's first pastor in his Christian church just before he became president. Some of the quotes, well, it was regarding the inequality between the races. Some of Barack's quotes are, "We can't drive our SUVs and eat as much as we want and keep our homes on 72 degrees at all times and then just expect that other countries are going to say, okay." Obama's policies tend to favor world's problems over American problems.
B.O.
B.O. Well, that fundamentally transforms this podcast to our final and current Commander-in-Chief, number 45, Donald J. Trump. Make America great again. From the beginning of his presidency, he's been accused of being a womanizer, a racist, a Russian spy, just about anything you can imagine.
Something that's interesting about Donald Trump is that his, I believe, great-grandfather was a survivor of the Spanish flu and was a immigrant from Germany. He built his real estate business and became very wealthy, which is why Donald Trump is a real estate guy today.
Oh, I know what's weird. He's actually the oldest president to ever win election at 70. He's the oldest guy. It's hard to believe, but that's true. Fidel Castro survived 11 presidents of the United States. Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, G.W. Bush, Obama, but he couldn't take 15 minutes of Trump, and I don't think you could take 15 minutes of more of this. So that concludes our weird U.S. presidency. Thanks for listening. Give us some information on what you think. Thank you.